My partner's best friend called me a grease monkey at a dinner party. Right there, in front of everyone. My partner just laughed and said, "Well, someone has to fix the cars, don't they?" I didn't say a word. I folded my napkin, pushed back my chair, and walked out. 4 days later, she was telling everyone I'd had some kind of emotional breakdown. Let me take you back. I'm Trevor. 64 years old. I run a panel and paint business out of Mount Maunganui, have done for going on 37 years now. Started in a rented tin shed behind my uncle's place in Papamoa with nothing but a compressor, a spray gun, and more stubbornness than sense. These days, I've got a proper workshop on Hewlett's Road, 12 staff, 2 spray booths, and a reputation that keeps the phone ringing 6 months out. We do everything from insurance repairs to full classic car restorations. Last year alone, we turned over close to $2 million. I'm not saying that to boast. I'm saying it because it matters for what happened next. Gail came into my life about 4 years ago. She was 61 at the time, sharp dresser, quick laugh, worked as a property manager for a real estate firm in Tauranga. We met at a fundraiser for Surf Life Saving at the Mount. She was with a group of women from her office. I was there because my mate Neil had roped me in to help with the barbecue. She came up to get a sausage and we got talking about the weather, then about the beach, then about everything else. By the end of the night, I had her number and the kind of nervous energy I hadn't felt since I was 20. Things moved at a sensible pace, the way they should when you're past 60 and you've already been through one marriage that didn't work out. My ex-wife and I split when our kids were teenagers. That was 20-odd years ago now. No drama, just 2 people who'd grown in different directions. I've got a daughter, Lisa, down in Christchurch, and a son, Brett, up in Auckland. Both doing well. Both told me they liked Gail when I introduced her. Gail and I never moved in together, which suited us fine. She had her townhouse in Otamoatai. I had my place in Papamoa, the one I'd built up from a rundown 3-bedroom into something I was properly proud of. New kitchen, new bathroom, a deck out the back that looked straight across the dunes to the ocean. I'd done most of the work myself over the years. Weekends, she'd come to mine or I'd go to hers. We'd cook dinner, watch something on the telly, potter around the garden. Comfortable. Easy. Or so I thought. The trouble, as it usually does, came wrapped in friendship. Gail had a best friend called Moira. Moira Fitzpatrick. They'd worked together at the real estate firm for donkey's years and were thick as thieves. Moira was one of those women who seemed to have an opinion about everything and a kind word about nothing. She sold high-end properties around Bethlehem and Matua, drove a white Range Rover, and never missed a chance to let you know about it. Every conversation with Moira eventually circled back to money, status, or who was doing better than whom. I'd copped little digs from Moira before. Nothing I couldn't brush off. Comments about my work clothes when I picked Gail up from office functions. A raised eyebrow when I mentioned I'd spent the weekend pulling the diff out of a 1968 Holden Kingswood. Once, at a Christmas party, she'd said to Gail right in front of me, "You're the only property manager I know whose boyfriend turns up with oil under his fingernails." Gail had laughed it off and I'd let it go. Not worth the hassle. Life's too short for petty arguments with people who don't matter. But what happened at Neil and Sandra's dinner party in March, that was different. That crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Neil Cunningham is one of my oldest mates. We go back to Otamoatai College, class of 1979. He married Sandra in the late 80s and they've been solid ever since. Good people. Neil's a retired builder, Sandra used to run a florist in the Tauranga CBD. They'd invited us over for dinner at their place in Bethlehem. Nothing fancy, just a Saturday night roast with a few couples. Neil's brother-in-law Alec and his wife were there, another couple I didn't know well from Sandra's book club, and Moira, because Gail had asked if she could bring her along since Moira's husband had recently left her and she was, quote, going through a rough patch. I'd agreed, because what kind of bloke says no to that? The evening started well enough. Neil and I talked about the All Blacks while I helped him carve a lamb. Sandra had done her usual spread, roast vegetables, camara, the lot. The wine was flowing, conversation was easy. I was actually enjoying myself, which I mention because I'm not naturally a dinner party person. I'd rather be in the shed with the radio on, truth be told. It was after dessert when things turned. We were all around the table, cups of tea and coffee, and somehow the conversation drifted to holidays. Sandra was talking about a cruise they'd booked through the Pacific Islands. Alec and his wife had just come back from a few weeks in Fiji. Moira, of course, had been to Italy 3 times and made sure everyone knew it. Then Moira looked at Gail and said, loud enough for the whole table, so when are you and Trevor finally going to do something interesting? You can't spend every holiday puttering around that house in Papamoa. Gail shifted in her seat. We're happy as we are, Moira. Trev's got the business and I've got my own commitments. Moira snorted. Actually snorted. Oh, come on. He's a grease monkey, Gail. A panel beater. It's not like he's performing heart surgery. Surely he can take a week off from bashing dents out of Corollas. The table went quiet. That particular silence where everyone is looking at their plate but listening with every cell in their body. I looked at Gail. Waiting. For years together, and this was the moment that mattered. This was where she'd say, don't talk about him like that. Or, Trevor's built that business from nothing and I'm proud of him. Or even just, that's enough, Moira. She laughed. Not an uncomfortable laugh. A real one. The kind that comes easy when you agree with what's been said. Well, someone has to fix the cars, don't they, she said, and she patted my arm like I was a child she was defending with the weakest excuse she could manage. A few people around the table chuckled nervously. Moira leaned back, satisfied. Neil caught my eye from across the table and I could see the anger in his face, but it was too late. The damage was done. I sat there for maybe 5 seconds. Felt longer. Then I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, stood up, and said, Neil, Sandra, thank you for a lovely dinner. I walked to the hall, put on my jacket, picked up my keys from the bowl by the door, and left. I heard Gail call my name as I was halfway down the drive, but I didn't turn around. Got in my Uda, started it, and drove home. My phone buzzed before I'd even turned onto State Highway 2. Where did you go? That was rude, Trevor. Come back, we haven't even had the cheese. Then, 20 minutes later, you're being ridiculous. Moira didn't mean anything by it. Then, call me. Then, an hour later, fine. Be like that. I turned the phone to silent and sat on my deck in the dark, listening to the surf. Drank a beer. Then another. Not because I was upset. Because I was clear. The kind of clear you get when something you've been trying not to see finally steps into the light and forces you to look at it. I slept well that night. Better than I had in months. Sunday morning, I was up at 5:30 as usual. Went for a walk along the beach, came back, made a pot of tea. Turned my phone on to 14 messages from Gail and 3 missed calls. The messages followed a predictable arc: confusion, then irritation, then anger, then the soft approach. I'm coming over. We need to sort this out, Trev. You can't just walk out on people like that. I sent back one text, ring me when you're ready to have a proper conversation about what happened. Not about my reaction. About what was said and what you did. She was at my door within the hour. Let herself in with the spare key I'd given her, which already felt like a mistake I should have corrected a long time ago. This is absurd, she said, standing in my kitchen with her arms folded. You've embarrassed me in front of Neil and Sandra. Moira rang me in tears last night thinking she'd caused some sort of scene. She did cause a scene, I said, leaning against the bench. She called me a grease monkey. In front of everyone. And you laughed. Oh, for heaven's sake, Trevor. It was a joke. That's just Moira. She doesn't have a filter. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows it because everyone allows it. Including you. What was I supposed to do? Start a fight at Sandra's dinner table? You were supposed to say something. Anything. 4 years, Gail. For years, and you couldn't manage. Don't talk about my partner that way. She sighed, the way people sigh when they think you're being unreasonable but can't quite explain why. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was one comment. It wasn't one comment. It's been dozens of comments over 4 years. And every single time, you've laughed along or said nothing. This was just the one that made me stop pretending I hadn't noticed. So what are you saying? I'm saying we're done, Gail. Her face changed then. The irritation drained out and something else took its place. Not sadness exactly. More like disbelief. The look of someone who'd assumed certain things about the ground they were standing on and just felt it shift. You can't be serious. Over Moira running her mouth? Over you running alongside her? That's not fair. Fair is a weather forecast, Gail. This is about respect. You don't have it for me. Maybe you never did. And I'm too old to spend whatever years I've got left hoping you'll develop it. She tried everything over the next hour. She cried. She apologized. She promised to talk to Moira. She said I was the best man she'd ever been with. She asked if I remembered the trip to Queenstown, the night we sat by Lake Wakatipu, and I told her I loved her for the first time. I remembered. But memories don't fix the present. When none of it worked, she left. Slammed the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Over the next few days, I went about my business. Literally. We had a 1965 Mustang in the booth that needed a full bare metal respray, and losing myself in the preparation work was exactly what I needed. Sand, prime, sand again. There's a rhythm to it that clears the head. On the third day, my daughter Lisa rang me from Christchurch. Dad, what's going on? Gail's posted something on Facebook about being abandoned by someone she trusted. Her friends are all commenting. Someone called you emotionally stunted. I didn't have Facebook. Never wanted it. So I had no idea Gail had taken our breakup public. Lisa read some of it to me. The broad strokes were that I'd humiliated her by storming out of a dinner party over a harmless joke, then refused to communicate like an adult. Moira's comment underneath was predictable. You deserve someone who's emotionally mature enough to handle a bit of banter. Banter. That's what they were calling it. I told Lisa not to worry. She said, Dad, I'm not worried. I'm angry. That woman never deserved you. My son Brett rang the next day with a similar message, only shorter and more direct, as is Brett's way. Stuff her, Dad. Come up to Auckland for a weekend. We'll go to the rugby. I texted Gail on the Thursday. I'll drop your things round on Saturday morning at 9. I boxed everything up. Please have my bits ready. She replied immediately, we need to talk properly. Stop being childish. I didn't take the bait. Saturday. 9 o'clock. I'll leave the spare key in the letterbox. When I pulled up to her townhouse on Saturday morning, she was standing in the doorway. She'd done her hair, put on the dress she knew I liked, the green one from that shop in Mount Maunganui. I recognized the tactic because I'd fallen for it before. Not this time. Trevor, this has gone on long enough, she said, voice gentle. Come inside. I'll put the kettle on. Just here for my things, Gail. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I checked my watch. 5 minutes. She launched into what I can only describe as a prepared speech. How sorry she was. How she'd spoken to Moira and told her she'd gone too far. How Moira was willing to apologize to me over coffee. You still don't understand, I said. I do understand. It's about my reaction, not Moira's words. And I'm truly sorry, Trev. It won't happen again. You're right about that. I picked up the cardboard box she'd packed with my things. A few books, my good jersey, a torch I'd left in her garage, some fishing gear. I noticed she'd kept the framed photo of us at the Bay of Islands. I didn't ask for it back. Is that it then? She said, her voice cracking. For years and you just walk away? For years and you just laughed, Gail. We've both made our choices. You'll regret this. Good luck finding someone else at your age who'll put up with your boring shed and your old cars and your 6 o'clock bedtime. Thanks for confirming I'm making the right call. As I headed for the door, she played her last card. What about the trip to Hawke's Bay? The wine tour with the girls in June? I've already told everyone you're coming. The accommodation's booked. I paused. Everyone? You mean Moira? Her silence told me everything. Enjoy the wine tour, I said, and closed the door behind me. The fallout played out exactly as you'd expect. More social media posts I didn't see but heard about. Mutual friends choosing sides. Gail's sister rang me to say I was being pig-headed over a trivial comment and that Gail was devastated. I thanked her for the call and said I wished Gail well, but my decision was final. I focused on work. Hit the gym 3 mornings a week instead of 2. Started going to the Mount Maunganui RSA on Friday evenings again, something I'd stopped doing because Gail didn't like the crowd there. Reconnected with mates I'd been neglecting. Neil, in particular, was a rock. He'd been furious about what Moira had said and told me he'd almost thrown her out of his house that night. Sandra gave her a right telling off after you left, he said over a beer one evening. But Gail just sat there defending her. That's when I knew you were done, mate. 2 weeks later, Sandra rang me. Trevor, I think there's something you should know. Go on. After you left the dinner, Moira kept going. She spent a good 20 minutes telling everyone you were beneath Gail. Called you uneducated, said Gail was wasting her best years on a tradesman with no ambition. Neil told her to shut up or get out. She went off like a firecracker. And Gail? Gail finally told her to stop. But it was only after Neil had stepped in. And honestly, Trev, it felt more like she was embarrassed about the scene than actually defending you. Too little, too late, I said. I know. But that's not why I'm calling. The Hawke's Bay wine tour, it's not just a girls' trip. Gail's been telling people you two were going to announce your engagement there. The words hit me like cold water. Because here's the thing. I had been thinking about it. Not an engagement exactly, but something more. I'd been looking at rings at a jeweler in the Strand. Nothing decided, nothing bought. Just looking. Testing the idea. I never told her that, I said carefully. I never mentioned rings to anyone. Sandra hesitated. She's been going through your things, Trevor. Your phone, your browser history. She found the jeweler's website in your search history weeks ago. Told Moira. Moira's been helping her plan the whole thing. The invasion of privacy hit harder than the insult at the dinner table. Gail had been snooping through my personal things for weeks. Going through my phone while I was in the shower. Checking my browsing history when I stepped outside. And instead of feeling wrong about it, she'd been treating the information like a tool. Planning an announcement I'd never agreed to. There's one more thing, Sandra said. Moira and Gail's boss, Derek. They've been seeing each other for months. Gail knows. She's been covering for Moira at work, swapping rosters, lying about site visits. That's the real reason Gail won't stand up to Moira. Moira has leverage. The pieces fell into place like tumblers in a lock. Gail's endless tolerance for Moira's behavior. The way she'd brush off every insult, every dig, every snide remark about my work. It wasn't loyalty to a friend. It was fear. Fear that Moira would stop keeping quiet about whatever arrangement they had, and Gail would lose her standing at the firm. Thanks for telling me, Sandra. I'm sorry, Trevor. You deserved better. A week later, Gail turned up at my workshop unannounced. My office manager, Val, tried to stop her, but Gail pushed past and walked straight into my office. We need to talk, she said, closing the door. I stayed in my chair. I'm working, Gail. If you want to talk, ring bell and make a time. Stop being difficult. This is important. What is it? The Hendersons, she said. I knew the name. The Henderson family owned a chain of retirement villages across the Bay of Plenty. They'd been expanding, building new facilities in Tapuke and Katy. Big money. Big contracts. What about them? They're looking for someone to do the fleet maintenance on all their company vehicles. 32 cars and vans. Long-term contract. Ongoing. And I've been managing their property portfolio for the last 2 years. They trust me. I mentioned that my partner runs the best panel and paint shop in the Bay. They want to meet you. There it was. The real reason for the visit. Not reconciliation. Not love. Business. So ring a panel beater, I said. Trevor. Please. This contract would be worth over $100,000 a year to you. Ongoing. I'm trying to help. No. You're trying to use me. Same as always. I'm not your prop, Gail. Not your backup plan. Not your business referral. I'm the grease monkey who fixes Corollas, remember? For the first time, I saw something real in her face. Not regret for hurting me. Regret for losing access to what I could offer her. Dal will show you out. Please don't come back. She left without another word. 3 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line, you were right. I should have spoken up years ago. It was signed with a G. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need rebuilding once they're burned. A month passed. Then 2. Life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I'd been missing. The business was humming. We finished the Mustang restoration and the owner, a retired farmer from Tapuke, cried when he saw it. Actually stood there in the workshop with tears running down his face because it was the same model his father had driven when he was a boy. Moments like that remind you why you do the work. I joined the local classic car club, something I'd been meaning to do for years but never had because weekends were always committed to Gail's schedule. Met some good people. Started bringing the Kingswood to the monthly meets at the Memorial Park. That's where I met Helen. She was standing by a 1970 Holden Toyota, bonnet up, explaining the engine work she'd done herself to a circle of blokes who were clearly impressed. Helen Cartwright. 59. A retired draftsman who'd spent 30 years designing commercial buildings for a firm in Hamilton before relocating to the Mount for the lifestyle. She knew cars. Knew tools. Knew what it meant to build something with your hands and take pride in the result. We got talking over a cuppa at the club rooms. Then again at the next meet. Then I asked if she wanted to come see the Kingswood at my place, and she said yes, and we stood in my shed for 2 hours talking about differential ratios and panel gaps, and somehow it was the most natural conversation I'd had in years. Helen was everything Gail wasn't. Direct. Unpretentious. She wore jeans and work boots and didn't apologize for it. She laughed properly, the kind of laugh that starts in the belly and doesn't care who hears it. And she respected what I did, not because of how much money it made, but because she understood the skill behind it. Do you know how few people can do a proper bare metal respray? She said to me one evening, sitting on my deck with a glass of wine, watching the sun drop behind Mao. It's an art. Same as anything done well. People who look down on tradespeople have never tried to do what tradespeople do. I didn't tell her about Gail. Not then. It would come later, naturally, the way these things do when you're building something honest. We took things slowly. A dinner here, a drive there. She came to the workshop one Saturday and helped me strip a set of doors from a 1972 Valiant Charger. Side by side in the shed, radio on, cups of tea getting cold on the bench. Comfortable. Easy. But this time, the ease came from mutual respect, not from one person settling and the other pretending not to notice. 3 months later, I got the rest of the story. Neil rang me on a Tuesday night. "Mate, you're not going to believe this. The Hendersons? That fleet contract Gail was banging on about? What about it? They rang the workshop directly." "Your workshop?" "Said they'd been researching panel and paint businesses in the region and yours came top of every list. They want to talk." I sat down. "Gail didn't refer them?" "Mate, Gail's in strife. Apparently she'd been promising the Hendersons all sorts, discounted rates from her boyfriend's business, priority service, the lot. When they found out you two had split and she'd been making promises she had no authority to make, they pulled their entire property portfolio from her firm. She didn't just lose the fleet contract she never had. She lost them as property clients too." "What happened to her?" "Demoted. Shifted from commercial to residential. And Moira's in the wind. Derek's wife found out about the affair. Massive blow-up at the office Christmas function, apparently. Moira resigned before they could sack her. Last I heard, she'd moved to Rotorua." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no smugness. Just a quiet tiredness, like watching weather pass over the ranges and knowing it was never yours to control. A few weeks after that, Gail's father rang me. Keith. 78, old school, ran a building supplies yard in Waikaton his whole working life before retiring. We'd always got along. He was a tradesman himself, understood the value of hard work and the weight of a good reputation. "Trevor, I'm not ringing to ask you to take her back," he said straight away. "I just want you to know I respect how you handled it. No shouting, no public carry-on. You just walked out and held your ground. That takes backbone. I appreciate that, Keith. I raised her to know better than that. I don't know where she learned to look down on honest work, but it wasn't from me." He paused. "You're a good man, Trevor. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That call meant more to me than you probably knew. It told me the apple had fallen well clear of the tree. The social circle that had been so quick to call me oversensitive went notably quiet once the truth about Moira's affair came out. Funny how a bit of context changes the conversation. 6 months on, I ran into Gail at the Bayfair shopping center. Wasn't planned. I was picking up a new set of overalls from the workwear shop. She was coming out of the pharmacy. She looked different. Quieter. Less put together in that careful, calculated way she used to be. "Trevor." "Hello." "Gail. Can we sit down for a minute? The food court's just there." We sat at a corner table with paper cups of flat white. No drama. No tears. Just two people in their 60s who'd shared 4 years and were now sitting on opposite sides of a table and a truth neither of them could change. "I owe you a proper apology," she said. "Not the ones I gave you before, where I was really just trying to get you to come back. A real one." I listened. Losing you, and then the trouble at work, it forced me to look at myself. Really look. I'd let Moira set the standard for how I treated people. I was so afraid of losing her approval that I sacrificed yours. I let her talk about you like you were nothing, and the worst part is, there were times I believed her. Not because you deserved it, but because I'd lost sight of what actually matters. "And what matters?" I asked. "Character. Decency. Someone who shows up every day and does honest work and doesn't need applause for it. That's you, Trevor. That was always you. And I was too stupid and too scared to see it." I nodded. Didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. Are you seeing someone?" "Yes. A few months now." "Is she good to you?" "She is." Gail nodded slowly. "Then she's lucky. I hope she knows what she's got." We parted ways outside the shopping center. No promises of friendship. No plans to catch up. Just closure, clean and honest, the way it should have been from the start. Moira. Last I heard she'd set up in Rotorua and was trying to break into a new real estate market. I don't know how that's going. Don't much care, either. Some people don't change. They just find a new town and a new audience for the same old performance. The Henderson contract came through. 32 vehicles on an annual service and bodywork agreement. Good, steady work that keeps two of my guys busy full-time. They'd found me through the classic car club, of all things. One of the Henderson sons had seen the Mustang restoration we'd done and asked around. Reputation. That's all it ever comes down to. Helen and I are still together. Taking it slow, building something solid, the way you build anything that's meant to last. Last month, she helped me design a new tool storage system for the workshop. Proper engineering drawings, measurements down to the millimeter. We spent a whole weekend building it together, and when we stood back and looked at the finished product, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Not bad for a grease monkey." I laughed. Because this time, it was a joke made by someone who respects me. And that makes all the difference. If I'd stayed with Gail, I'd still be sitting at dinner tables, absorbing insults, telling myself it didn't matter. It did matter. It always mattered. I was just too comfortable to admit it. I sold the ring I'd almost bought. Went back to the jeweler on the Strand and cancelled the levy. Used the refund to buy a set of panel beating hammers I'd had my eye on for years. English made, 1950s, proper craftsmanship. Better investment than a ring for a woman who thought my work was beneath her. Some of you reading this might think I was too harsh. That I should have tried harder, given her another chance, worked through it. Here's what I've learned in 64 years, respect isn't something you negotiate. It's not something you earn by being patient enough or forgiving enough. Either someone sees your worth or they don't. And once you've heard them laugh at who you are, right there at the dinner table with the roast lamb going cold, you can't unhear it. Walking away doesn't make you weak. Sometimes it takes more guts to leave than it does to stay and fight for someone who doesn't value you. I chose peace over war. Self-respect over someone else's approval. Best decision I ever made. One last thing, because I've had a few of the boys at the workshop ask me about it. They said, "Trev, didn't it bother you? Being called a grease monkey? A panel beater? Like it's something to be ashamed of?" And I told them what I'll tell you now. There is no shame in skilled work. None. The person who fixes your car, builds your house, lays your pipes, wires your switchboard, they've spent years learning a craft that keeps the world running. Every trade has its masters, and mastery deserves respect, whether you're restoring a classic Mustang or building a retaining wall or fitting a new roof. The people who look down on trades are usually the ones who couldn't change a tire if their life depended on it. So if someone calls you a grease monkey, or a sparky, or a chippy, and they mean it as an insult, that tells you nothing about your worth and everything about theirs. Hold your head up. Do your work well. The right people will see it. The wrong ones will call you names at dinner parties. Let them. Your craft is worth more than their opinion. And your peace is worth more than their approval. That's something no one can take from you, not at any dinner table, not at any age, not ever.